welcome back to another episode of Over the Glass. I am your host, Jay.
I'm co-host Nessa. Sorry we skipped a week. I had to help my girlfriend move out. She's officially moved out. I'm so sad. She's in LA.
Womp.
Oh, so alone. Anyways, so we wanted to start off this week by talking about the first three draft picks of this past draft, because they had an interesting preseason. Well, they had an interesting week in the preseason, starting with Bedard, and I know you want to talk about him first.
Bedard got a welcome from Fleury. The Minnesota Wild and the Chicago team went into shootout in one of their preseason games, and I remember seeing something prior to the game where reporters were asking Fleury about, like, oh, are you looking forward to, going up against Bedard, or just like his opinions of it. And, he seemed in good spirits. He obviously knows that this is like the generational talent that's up and coming in the NHL, and, but he didn't really have too much else to say. Well, enter the shootout, and Fleury looks like he's in game 7 of a Stanley Cup playoffs, just kind of totally locked in and not allowing anybody to get past him,
and tripping them all over the place.
Yeah, so Bedard, with his hands and everything, looked like he was trying to outdangle Fleury, and Fleury, being a former first round pick for almost like 20 years ago. Like, he's been in this game for a while. He's seen a lot of things, and he just looked like he wasn't interested in these games that Bedard was coming with. He's just like, this child. Look at this child. And he did go for the poke check, which is pretty, typical of Fleury. He's very active with his stick. He did miss, so then Bedard, dangled around the stick and looked like he was trying to get control of it to go backhand, but then Fleury reached out, and I don't think he would have been able to do it anyway because he looked off balance and all that stuff. But Fleury reached out and ended up tripping Bedard, and he went flying and just kind of sat there looking like he had to go to his room with no dinner, and Fleury skated by, gave him a little stick tap on his shin pad and skated away. I just thought it was just kind of amusing. Obviously, he's going to be really good, but Fleury's trying to level him out a little bit with not getting too over the top.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I think it's interesting how much hype this kid is getting, because obviously he killed it in juniors. Everyone has really high expectations of the poor kid. And this, I feel like this got talked about and blown out of proportion just because, oh, he didn't score. Oh, welcome to the NHL, bud.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I find it interesting too that I see a lot of people hating on him already. Like, it's his fault that the media is giving him so much attention. It's like he's just trying to come into this league and do his thing. It's not like he asked for this attention. You don't have to hate him yet. He hasn't started playing games yet. But I don't know. Fleury's always been an interesting goalie. I had a very big hatred for him when he was on Vegas, because he refuses to let those pucks go in. Mm-hmm. And it's preseason. Like, you don't have to take it so seriously. So I'm currently watching the one with Hall. And he literally swipes his leg and has him go flying into the board.
I think Hall's was way more hilarious, just like the airtime that he got. Obviously everyone looks like they were okay and stuff like that, so we can laugh about it. But what was it that? Yeah. So going back to what you were talking about, where you had a hatred for him when he was on Vegas. So yeah, like, that was an experience that I did not expect to have, because I was following him when he was on the Pittsburgh Penguins, and like, he's a very talented goaltender, obviously has what is it, 3 Stanley Cups to back up, you know, for his resume. And he, what is it, prior to that draft was kind of like one of his down seasons. That was when Matt Murray kind of took over the crease. And I think, you know, he had a bit of a surge when they went into the Cup finals and things like that. But I remember since the draft was coming up, the expansion draft was coming up for the Golden Knights, he had actually, you know, spoken with management and let them know that he's okay if you guys want to put him, you know, on the list. And so obviously, you know, Vegas took him, and, you know, during his time there, you know, he became, you know, a fan favorite. And, you know, I want to say is definitely one of the reasons why they got as far as they did. But of course, with that said, as somebody who was a fan of him prior to going to Vegas, and, you know, I felt like, oh, what a selfless move to, you know, say, hey guys, like, it's been great, you know, to help this team in Pittsburgh. And, you know, I can kind of see that, you know, maybe my time is kind of running out here, or maybe he's kind of seeing it as like, you know, I'm passing the torch to Matt Murray and things like that. So, you know, all good things until he gets to Vegas, and then they have, you know, their inaugural season, and everybody knows what happened then. And what I still feel like is a fabricated rivalry between Vegas and San Jose. We all know the true rivalry is NorCal versus SoCal. So for those first, you know, he was with the team for 3 seasons, 2 seasons? I can't remember anymore.
How long has the team been around?
A minute.
6?
It's been a minute since he's been
3,
there.
right? 3 or 4.
I want to say it's at least 2. Feels more like 3, but who knows anymore. But in any case, during that time, yeah, like my feelings towards Fleury definitely shift. I definitely started getting mad at him when he gets a bit snippy in the crease. He does a little, like, he does some things where he knows no one's looking, and he kind of like bends the rules and things like that. So those were the things that were starting to stick out to me a lot, and I was just like not a fan of him during that time. And so I think it's still messed up what Vegas did to move on from him. But with that said, it was, well, the year after that he was on the Chicago team, so that didn't make it any better. But then he went over to the Wild, and that's where he is now. And I'm like, thank God you are not on the Chicago team or Vegas anymore, so I can admire Fleury again. And what is it? Last season, he had that thing with, I don't remember who it was anymore, that provoked the fight.
Oh, what fight?
No, it was another. Oh, it was Bennington. Duh. Of course, it's Bennington. Bennington was like egging Fleury to come over, and like Fleury, I think he had went to the center ice to kind of be like, well, everybody's getting into it, so maybe I should come over. And I think Bennington was the one who was like in this scrum, just being Bennington, and I think he acknowledged that Fleury was there, and he's just like, you, whatever, and he's just like, okay, coming over. And he's just, you know, he's being silly about it. It's not like he's, you know, I didn't think that he was angry, but more just like, I need to get in there, I need to, you know, help my guys out and whatever. And then the refs saw that Fleury was coming over, and they're like, oh, no, we can't have this. And Fleury's like, no, he wants to fight, let me go fight. And they're like, no. And he's like, okay, well, at least let me get my helmet, let me get my stuff. And then I'm just like, he's lying. You're going to let him go, and he's going to go jump Bennington. Yeah.
When he was on Vegas, I remember a game against the Sharks. A few games. And going back to what you had said about certain things that he does when no one's looking, there was like a scrum near the net, and there was like this whole thing. I think Burns got lost his stick at some point, and Fleury picked it up and put it through the camera hole and gave it to a fan. And so Burns was looking for his stick, and it's like, why? Like when you're a Sharks fan and you see that, you get irritated by it, right? But if you're on Vegas side, you're gonna find that amusing. You're gonna become a bigger fan of him, and he would always do these like shit stirring things, you know. And it was so
like,
annoying.
He's a prankster, which I can appreciate, but someone like a Corey Perry. Huge reason why I couldn't stand the Ducks on top of just rivalry. Just the whole rivalry aspect of it. Because I don't remember who it was that he was doing this against, but somebody had dropped their stick or something like that, and he went to go pick it up and then like hand it to them, and when they went to go grab it, he dropped it. And I'm just like, you're such a jerk. You're just a jerk, okay? Like. One other highlight that I saw about Fleury recently, because everyone started reposting things related to Fleury, was something got heated during a game last season against the Oilers, and Fleury's helmet, I think, had come off or whatever, and it was like down near like the left side face-off dot. So he went to go grab it, and then Leon Draisaitl was skating over and he kicked it. And then Fleury grabbed Draisaitl, and everyone was already kind of like piling in on him, so he grabbed his helmet and then like tossed it over.
Can't let it go. Oh,
it's just children in a playground.
Yeah. Speaking of children, back to the draft picks, dudes. Do you want to talk about the Fantilli?
Okay.
You were pretty amused by it.
At least it was a good hit. At least there wasn't any like head contact. It wasn't like dirty in any case. It was just, she saw the opportunity. Fantilli, getting introduced to this league and everything like that. Like the kid was like, "Oh, go get the puck now!" And like goes get the puck, does something with it, turns around, and there's like a 2-second moment where he's just like, "Oh shit!"
Deer in the headlights.
And he's just like, "Oh!" And then, yeah, TJ Oshie just like putted him.
Yeah,
and he's just like, "Wow!" And
another welcome.
Up.
His stick went flying. It's so cartoonish. Like, it's just another welcome to the NHL moment.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry for this, but welcome, kid. Big old shoulder bump. The one that isn't as fun and lighthearted is Leo Carlson. Apparently during practice the other day had to be helped off the ice and couldn't put pressure on his right foot. So unfortunately, yes, it's also part of the game. But this is a kid that the Anaheim fans were excited to root for this season. I haven't heard any updates on him. I haven't seen any. Hopefully he's okay and won't be out for too long. But it's just interesting.
I did see an update that I don't know what type of injury it is, but the update is that it isn't as bad as they thought it could be. Yeah, so that's as much as I know.
Good. Because it's like Anaheim was dead last in the standings last year. They've been in a similar situation as the Sharks fans. They don't have a lot to root for, so it would suck that one of the things that they were excited to be for this season is out of the question.
Well, we don't know if he's out for the season.
No. I didn't say out for the season. I said he's one reason they have to root for in the season.
Yes.
Okay, and now to talk about our dear little Sharks. And all of the projections that amused you this week.
So I'm not sure where this graphic came from. So there's a graphic that was circulating this week related to each NHL team's biggest question mark heading into, next season. And, there's some that, make sense. The Chicago team, obviously, last season, they got rid of a ton of their depth. And really the only notable veterans that stuck around is, well, they signed Seth Jones the year before that to a massive contract, so he wasn't going anywhere. And then the notable superstars on that team being Patrick Kane and
Taves.
What's his first name? Taves. What's the other Taze's first name?
The other one is Devon.
The other one that obviously I don't care about because I can't remember his first name.
Oh, the Chicago one? Oh my god. What is his name?
What is his name?
I only know Devon Taves. He's the only one that matters.
Oh, Jonathan. Wow.
Oh, yeah.
If you were ever questioning how much we do not care about the Chicago team on this podcast, there you go. So, Jonathan Taves, who was actually taking a year off, but, good for him, all things considered. Yeah, so, they kind of just imploded their team into the sun. Denied forever that they were tanking. They were tanking. And so their biggest question, obviously, kind of similar to probably where the Oilers were when they got Connor McDavid, and where they currently are to this day. They are constantly trying to build around their first overall pick, which is essentially what Chicago's going to have to do. They're going to have to find the support for Bedard because, yes, there's valid hype around Bedard, but a lot of the highlights that I was seeing during the preseason, he didn't even score. So it's kind of
he scored an empty net goal. Don't.
Woo! Yes!
He wasn't even excited for it.
So, it's yes, he's got amazing hands. He obviously his hockey IQ the ceiling is very high. So it's nice to look at during highlights, but at the end of the day, the points on the scoreboard are the ones that count the most, right? And if you, in the first couple of years, yeah, it's going to be fun to watch him, but when it goes nowhere, how happy are people going to be if he's not getting the help that he needs, not only on his line, but across the board, because as we see with the Oilers, yeah, when McDavid's on the ice, the probability that a goal is going to be scored is exponentially higher. And I think for I don't remember if it was done this season, but I remember last season he was on both power play units.
Really?
Yes. Oh, so it's you're obviously using him for as much ice time as he can handle, but that in itself is a bit of a problem, is it not? Especially since you still cannot make it to the Cup final. So, that in itself makes sense. Chicago's going to find themselves in that situation where, great that you have Bedard, but it's just one guy. This is a team sport. If he played tennis, I'm sure he'd be fine. What were some ones that stuck out to you before we get to the one that made us laugh the most?
Honestly, I didn't pay too much attention to the other ones because it's it's all logical, right? It says Anaheim special teams, Preds offense. A lot of them have goaltending as their weak spots. Depth for the Avs, health. But then it's you get to the Sharks, it just says everything. Haters. But it's true. We don't know what this team is going to be capable of because it's such a medley of different, new players on the team. The ones who stuck around. they haven't done anything to impress us yet, right? Obviously, we have our favorites like Ferraro. Like, we love the kid on the team. He has a big personality, but he doesn't have a huge impact on the ice. You know, we're, I don't want to say stuck, but we're stuck with Vlasic. Like, we lost our biggest star, and that's what everyone's focusing on. They don't have Carlson anymore. This team's going to be the absolute worst, and this and that. It's like, do you know that for a fact? Like, we don't have high hopes for the team, but I also don't like hearing that my team's going to be the worst in the league.
I'm fine hearing that my team's going to be the worst in the league because we're the projected favorite to get the first overall pick.
Yeah,
but draft. But I do understand what you're saying, that if like other people are saying that your team sucks, it's like, but you don't actually know what we're doing, so you don't get to tell us we suck.
Yeah, nobody pays attention to the Sharks, like, ever, even when they're good.
They were following us when we were good. They were projecting us for quite some time in like the 2010 through even before that. Like, there was a good decade where everyone was talking about the Sharks to be projected as the Stanley Cup winner. And now
really? That must
have
been nice.
Yes.
That must have been nice. I have never known a time.
But, I mean, it's not as bad as the Leafs. Like, yes, we were being told that we choke in the playoffs, but it was not nearly as bad as the Leafs. Like, we were able to make it out of the first round. But
Slight
it's like,
shade.
but we could never get to the Cup final year after year of being like, well, San Jose's good to go. They're our favorite to win the Cup, and then we don't win the Cup. And it's after a while, it's like, I'm tired of talking about San Jose getting the Cup because they apparently don't want it.
I don't think I want the Sharks to be dead last, because we saw this past draft, as an example, the Ducks were last and they ended up picking third. So just because the odds are higher doesn't necessarily mean that we'll get first overall pick, you know?
I think that would probably piss me off so much.
Yeah. So, I mean, as long as they're worst of the, like,
I don't think we're going to
three.
be dead last. I think, like, I mean, yeah, like going back to what we were laughing about, where everything is a big question mark because the team has changed so much that it's hard to know. Like, even during preseason, I was just trying to focus on one or two players and everything like that, because if you try to watch it as a whole, it's horrendous. Like, obviously, these guys have been, practicing, like, several times during the week, and they're like, yeah, let's go with that line for this preseason. Like, you can't build up adequate chemistry when you're constantly just shuffling guys around. That's because that's what preseason is about. You're trying to figure out, okay, who am I going to have come to training camp and to make the team and like all this stuff, and then who is not quite ready to doesn't have the tools necessary that even if they aren't jiving with some guys right now, they have the potential to be moved around and still be able to make an impact at the NHL level. And then the other guys that need to work on more things and just like finding the guy that they can play well with, then they got to go down to the AHL or go back to their juniors and things like that. So I was trying to just focus in on, our up and coming who should be making the roster, like an Eklund, like a Bordelot. Interested to see, our AHL goalies, just because we got rid of, 2 or 3 of them last season. Mm-hmm. And we picked up a couple more, or, the ones that were in our system are coming up now. So, because goaltending for us, Kakkonen's on a 1 year. He's got 1 year left on his contract. Mackenzie Blackwood's got 2. Like, I'm mostly leaning more towards Kakkonen out of the 2. I like his vibes better. I can't say that at this time one is better than the other. Obviously, Blackwood had a lot. Actually, both of them kind of had. For Cockinen with the Wild and then for Mackenzie Blackwood with the Devils, they were kind of seen as like, we would like you to take over the crease. And they never kind of rose to that occasion. So these are kind of like trades that are made to just move players around just to change it up. So I can't say one is necessarily more suited for this situation with the Sharks than the other. But in terms of looking towards the future, I have more hopes and ambitions for our up and coming goaltenders. Like in our 2 to 3 year transition, like who is going to be the one that's going to be here for the 5th year moving forward?
Mm-hmm. I want to go back and talk about chemistry on this team. I was able to catch maybe 2 or 3 of the preseason games, and one of them, where they played the kid line, the first preseason game that Musty played, it was a line of Quentin Musty, who was a 26th overall pick in this past draft, William Eklund, and Thomas Bordelot. That line was so much fun to watch. I was able to catch like half of the second and the third period, and they were able to put up a really, really, really nice play and score on. Who were they playing against? The Kings?
Sure.
I can't even remember what team they were playing against, but like Eklund is looking like he, the player that we've all been excited to watch. Bordelot seems like he does well. Like he has really good chemistry with Eklund, so they were able to connect for that goal. And Musty is so fast. Like obviously he still needs a couple years to develop, but he was working really well with that line, and their passing, they were connecting almost every time. They're really fast, and it's the most excited I've been in a while for this team. I'm hoping we can start seeing this a little bit sooner rather than later. I don't want to wait another 3 years to be able to watch these guys play,
I want to say that we could probably see that line in like the next 2 years. Like obviously Musty's going down to the juniors, which he should, and then depending on how all that goes, I mean, I don't know how many years before he will find himself maybe in the AHL or on the big club, but that's definitely a line that I'm also looking forward to for the future. Mm-hmm. I'm just taking a look at I want to talk about Henry Thrun because on our last episode we were just kind of looking down the line on Cap Friendly about our defense, and he's not currently up with the Sharks in terms of what I'm looking at with contracts and stuff for the club. He's down with the AHL, which they did send down. I'm going to try to say his name. Mukamadulin?
Mukamadulin, I think.
Mukamadulin, okay. So I think that's fair to send him down just because right now we have, we've got a lot of defense while they're not ones that are like, I don't think that they're going to be here long term. But currently, he's still, I think it's a good idea to have Eklund and Bordelot up with the club because they've spent the last couple of years developing and things like that, and that's just the same sort of feeling that I have with Mukamadulin because he doesn't really need to be up with the big club right now. We're not going anywhere. At some point there can be injuries and he can come up and kind of get more of a feeling for the NHL level, but he doesn't need to, like, I don't have a strong desire to see him playing 82 games with the Sharks right now.
Yeah.
There's really no point. And, the Barracuda made a number of changes to their roster. So it's just going to be a really good opportunity for him to get a full season with the CUDA. But going back to Henry Thrun, like,
I'm excited for him.
I really liked what I saw with him getting time, like, on the first power play unit during preseason. Obviously, one of the other big question marks for the Sharks is our defense with Erik Karlsson being gone. Like, who's gonna be able to step up to that plate? Or are they gonna go with like a 5-forward unit? Like, obviously, they were playing around with all kinds of combinations during the preseason, and they'll probably take a lot of those over into, to start out with upcoming regular season this week. But I'd imagine it's going to change from week to week throughout this whole season. And I'm totally fine with that. But him and Mukmadulin were the two that were getting me excited.
Yeah. And once, we picked up another defenseman off waivers, so now it feels like Thrun is questionable to make the team.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. Like, I read an article, and I can't remember who wrote it. Probably Shane, because I only read his, and I think his name is Max Miller, who does for the Hockey News. One of the two talked about Greer's plans and why he keeps, like, signing players and bringing them in, even though it's more of prove-it contracts and stuff. And he basically said that he wants to make it more competitive for the young guns. Like, it should not be easy to make the NHL team, like it has been for the past few seasons before he came in. There was one year where there were like 20 something players from the CUDA that made their NHL debuts, and he was like, it should not be easy to make this team. I want to make it competitive. We're going to take our time developing these players, which is why it's taking so long for Eklund to come up, and Bordelot. And Bordelot, I still don't even know if he's going to make it full time. I think right now he'll make the team until Couture can make it back when he's healthy, and then he's questionable, right? Like, I don't feel like he's fully ready to be an NHLer. I think he still has some developing to do. I think Eklund is more ahead of him on that front, but it feels like, to me, it feels like this is the right way to go, right? Like, yes, we're excited to see the young players play, but also they need their time to develop to get to that level. So
yeah, I agree as well with Bordelot. Like, I feel much better with where he's at than he was the previous year, and then definitely when he got brought up after Michigan closed out their season. I'll reiterate what I said last time when we were talking about Bordelot last season. I just felt like he was 3 steps behind. Like, he just needs to be a little bit quicker. Like, just some of his, like, moves, it's like the guy already saw that you were going to do it. Mm-hmm. And the speed in which you did it is not quick enough for the NHL. But he's there, and I like what he's doing. It's just stuff was getting picked off. He just was not as in sync with where he needs to be competitive with the NHL. And during this preseason, obviously, like, teams are not playing their top guys and things like that, so it's a little bit harder to kind of, like, gauge if he's at that speed that he needs to be. But it did seem like he was maybe a step and a half away from, yes, this will be productive and good at the NHL level. So, yeah, I do agree that I think he's going to make the team, but whether he's going to stay up the whole time, it's really just going to be dependent on those things that we were just talking about. Like, he obviously has chemistry with Eklund, but if Eklund can't be, I don't even see either one of them being on the same line with each other, because Eklund does need the support of the veteran guys. If anything, maybe they find themselves both on a third line, fourth line, but I would honestly like Eklund to play like on the second line or maybe the first, but I think second line would be great with some strong veterans helping him out.
Yeah, I think eventually him playing on the line with Hurdle could be like really fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's too new. He's too fresh. He needs
That's a bit much. That's a bit much. If he finds himself just randomly on there, that'll be exciting, but let's not put all that pressure on poor little Eklund to play first line minutes. Like, he'll get just as much of a great experience and learn as he goes on the second or third line.
Yes. Okay. Enough about the Sharks, because we could go on and on with these guys. What's next on our agenda here?
Projected NHL teams for where they are, to project them for the season and for the Cup. I agree with the Cup favorites being the Hurricanes and the Oilers. Whether they'll actually get there, I was listening to some other podcast. I can't remember which one it is right now, so I don't want to like put any of their out there, but they had mentioned that the Hurricanes kind of have a conference final curse in a way, where they just can't seem to get over that hump. And then the Oilers are just kind of a grab bag of like, I don't doubt that they're going to make the playoffs, but year after year after year, they are constantly relying on Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl.
Yeah.
And last season, they picked up Campbell for God knows what reasons, and he ended up being the backup to Stuart Skinner. I'm a fan of Stuart Skinner. He obviously is on a good team that, while they do have defense problems, they can score. So and he has the potential to be a starter, but whether he'd be able to do that on like a team that wasn't so, that does not have a Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl, that is left to be determined. But the fact that they picked up Campbell and then he had a rough start, and then they're like, you know what, we're not even going to deal with you. We don't have time. Like, they are at that point where they're like, we cannot mess around. You have like the what do you call it? The leash is incredibly short. So whether the Oilers can find their right chemistry and not rely so much on McDavid, to be determined.
Yeah, I don't keep up with the Canes, so I have no opinion on this. I agree with the Oilers. It's always like, yeah, they have two of the best players in the league, but what else do you have? Like, do you have what it takes to win a Stanley Cup, really? I agree with the Cup contenders, which is the New York Rangers, Dallas Stars, Toronto Maple Leafs, the Avalanche, the Golden Knights, the Devils, and then the Bruins. I need the Devils to make it to the Eastern Conference Final for the Sharks' sake. So we can get another first-round draft pick, because why not?
I would say out of those, I'm more confident in, obviously, I feel like all of them are going to make it into the playoffs, but the ones that I feel more comfortable going into the playoffs at this moment are the Devils, the Dallas Stars, and unfortunately the Vegas Golden Knights. I don't know about the Avs, just because, again, they're going to go another season without Landeskog. Obviously they have Cale Makar, they have Devontae, they have
Rantanen,
McKinnon. They have a lot of great talent, but we saw what happened in the first round. You know, they had, I mean, obviously, the season before that when they won the cup, they had Nazem Kadri, and that was a huge problem when, you know, he went off and got another contract and went to the Flames. I mean, obviously they weren't going to keep him, but it ended up causing problems with their ability to be consistent for the next season to stay competitive. And then the Bruins have made a number of changes. Obviously, Bergeron's retired, and what was the thing that they, in the other graphic, center depth. Yeah, so we all know about the center depth. We have that problem on terms of on top of the everything that we have problems with. We're very familiar with center depth problems. And then the Rangers, they had a coaching change, and they moved a bunch of players as well. They moved stuff around, so obviously they have talent on their roster, but how that's all going to get pulled together. And then, of course, with the Leafs, well, we know what the situation is with the Leafs.
They're a good team.
The Leafs against the Leafs.
Yeah, always. Playoff caliber, like, do we want to go through all this? I don't know. It makes sense. You know, the Penguins, they have high expectations now that they have Carlson, and they're trying to get Crosby and Malkin and all them another cup before they all retire, because they're getting to hockey grandpa age.
I mean, all those guys in the playoff caliber row, they're all kind of in flux. There's a lot of moving parts, and they haven't had the best success in the last couple of seasons. So so like you said, I think it makes sense to kind of put them that they have the potential. They just kind of need to show it. Mm-hmm. The insiders.
I'm upset to see the Kings up there. They're ahead of their
insiders. I mean, I mean, they made the playoffs last season.
I know. I'm upset because the Sharks are so low right now, and Anaheim is like right there with them. Like, why do the Kings have to be the ones that came out of it first?
I mean, but the Kings have been going through their rebuild like much longer during our time of denial.
Yeah.
So I think the timeline kind of makes sense for them. Whether, I mean, it's not great because they're obviously. What we saw recently with
who are we talking about? The goalie?
Yeah.
Cal Peterson.
Peterson, right? Peterson, yeah. Take out the other T. Yeah. Peterson, like that was gonna be their next Jonathan Quick, and last season just they were like, you know what? Done with both of you. Get out.
Yeah.
And then he recently got put on waivers for I don't remember. Oh, the Flyers. Mm-hmm. So if you can't crack the Flyers lineup, something wrong.
Yeah, poor guy.
How do you feel about the Kraken being on the outside after they made their franchise debut in the playoffs and made it through the first round?
Yeah, I think it makes sense because it's only their third season coming up. Yeah. They're only coming into their third season. If people probably feel it was like a fluke for them to get in the first place. So this is kind of a season for them to prove themselves. Like it wasn't a fluke. Like we're a good team, you know. So yeah, on the outside it makes sense. I don't really know what's going on with the Preds. I would have assumed the Buffalo team.
Sabres.
Yes, thank you. I forgot their name. The Sabres. I would have thought they would be higher. I feel like they're up and coming too with their
team. I think they're like even more to prove than the insiders and the ones that have the potential to make the playoffs. Just because they're such a young team, now it's like, okay, you've kind of established yourselves. Now you have to kind of take that next step to now can you sustain yourself throughout the cup.
Yeah. I'm actually kind of surprised that Arizona is up in long shots and not down with lottery contenders. Like, didn't they suck?
Wait, which one? Who?
Arizona, the Coyotes.
Yeah, but they're also they're a young team, and they've been making all kinds of moves.
So
I think that I think they have, just from what I've been kind of seeing, like, people feel like they're in a state now where they can kind of start looking at how do they take that next step to get into the playoffs, and less of like them being the quote unquote loan shark, where they're going to be looking to grab all of your guys and to meet like the salary floor. I think they're transitioning out of that mindset. I think that's where they're at for the franchise now.
I guess. Plus, they got Logan Cooley coming in. Mm-hmm. He seems like he's going to be a fun player to watch this season, too. All of the lottery contenders make sense. But speaking of loan sharks...
Yes! The lottery favorite. I've never won the lottery, but I want to!
I would love to... Okay, obviously this is way too soon to talk about, but we've already talked about it in our little Discord chat with Nate. How the kid who's projected to go first overall next year for the draft, what's his name?
Celebrini. Brini, yes.
Celebrini.
Macklin Celebrini.
Who does he play for right now?
I don't want to anger any Boston people. So
okay, so, Boston College.
You better be right, or I'm going to have to edit that out. University. See, that's why I didn't want to say anything.
Boston University. Okay, so he plays currently for Boston University. He is from the Bay Area. He used to be a junior shark.
He played for the Junior Sharks. He's originally from Vancouver.
Why was he here? Huh, curious. Okay. So he used to play for the Junior Sharks.
I think it has something to do with, well, I'm not gonna say anything. I was trying to look into the history of how he found himself here, and I don't want to say it was like anything related to development, because it could have been that or related to his parents.
Oh,
but he's originally born in Vancouver.
From Vancouver. Played for the Junior Sharks, is currently playing for Boston University. So, okay. This is us joking about it, but like, imagine a former Junior Shark, which has only happened once ever in the Sharks' history, drafting a former Junior Shark. I think.
I've got his bobblehead in my queue.
Tennyson? Mm-hmm. Mike Greer is a Boston guy, and he loves Boston guys. He drafted Will Smith, we assume, because he committed to Boston College, right? Not university.
It's Boston College that he plays for. Yeah. Will Smith plays for Boston College. Macklin Celebrini plays for Boston University.
When Greer decided to pick his team to come out and work for the Sharks, all Boston dudes coming in, whether they went to school there or they're from there, whatever it was, there's a connection with Boston. And so, Junior Shark, currently in Boston, it makes sense. Mike Greer, beautiful. I would love it.
I mean, it's almost like it just needs to happen.
It's like meant to be.
How do we manifest this? What do we need to do to make this happen? Because it'd be like a Cinderella story for Mike Greer to be able to draft Macklin Celebrini.
First overall.
It just makes sense.
This is us manifesting it. All right. Some NHL news. I guess Bettman had like a meeting of some sort, press conference. Who knows? Says there's no plans for expansion or nothing, but there are some markets that are interested. So I'm curious, your opinion. Where would you want to see a new franchise pop up? I think Portland would be a good one.
See, so I have Portland. Like, that was the first thing that popped up in my head when you said that, but then I had a pause because I was trying to remember. I saw someone suggested that, and I couldn't remember which sport it was. And the one that now that I'm remembering it, it was because of the WNBA, and they were talking about another place. I mean, I think it would make sense. I mean, I'm not too familiar with the area of Portland in terms of, obviously, I've seen there's obviously like beer leagues out in like Portland. I don't really know the history of any hockey teams. I mean, yeah, well, there's the Portland Winterhawks. I'm not sure exactly where they play. So, there's interest there. And yeah.
Houston.
Why not?
Houston would be
Why
a good
not?
one too, because
Yes.
I mean, a big old state like Texas only has one hockey team. Yeah, people want Atlanta to get their team back. Of course, people talking about Quebec City, right? Or is it just
Yeah, Quebec.
somewhere?
Quebec has been going on and on about how they want a team there. Yeah.
Yeah. Another team in Canada could make sense because they only have a handful. But I don't know.
Well, a handful of NHL teams.
Yes.
They have
Yes.
plethora.
You're right.
there.
NHL teams. I don't know. My two would probably be Portland and Houston. But yeah,
I would say the same.
they
Maybe
also...
Utah, since they had the Sharks playing there recently.
Oh, Salt Lake
with,
City
with the Kings. Yep.
Yeah, you're right. That would be a good one too. The divisions would have to like realign themselves again, but okay. And he also announced that there's a projection of a salary cap bump between 87 to 88 million for 2024 to 25 next year, which is a big jump from, I think the cap right now is currently at 81 million, which could help.
Do you think, with that salary bump, do you think Austin Matthews stays in Toronto?
I think it depends what happens in the playoffs this year. Like, he could.
He wants to say goodbye. Ooh.
Who knows?
Get some Leafs fans mad.
Leafs fans stay mad. Yeah. It could be fun for the Sharks to be able to play around with that cap space.
Please, no long-term contracts for
No.
aging players. No. None of those. Mm-mm.
No, thank you.
We're so close to being out of that hole. Just so close.
And then one other thing that was talked about was something everyone's talked about already, kind of upsetting the way they phrase things, but the NHL, on ESPN.com, Ryan S. Clark reported, the NHL clarifies stance on specialty initiatives. Source says. I wonder who these sources are always. I'm always curious about that. But last June, I want to say, they put out a memo. Is that when they announced that the teams weren't going to be allowed to wear the warm-up jerseys for specialty nights, and everyone was upset about it because it's really dumb decision. They sent out an update recently because there was confusion among a handful of teams, maybe like 8 teams. And they wanted to clarify that because basically they said that the restrictions are going to be on ice only. The way it was phrased before says, quote, players shall not be put in the position of having to demonstrate, or where they may be appearing to demonstrate, personal support for any special initiatives. A factor that may be considered in this regard includes, for example, whether a player or players is required to be in close proximity to any groups or individuals visibly or otherwise clearly associated with such special initiatives. Unquote. My gosh, tripping over my words here. Now, when I read this, we all know what this means, right? Because think about Military Appreciation Night, think about Hockey Fights Cancer Night. Jeez.
Damn, Focky.
You know, sometimes you're so upset. Focky.
I'm gonna start calling stuff like this Focky.
You know, it makes sense. Hockey Fights Cancer Night, Military Appreciation Night, whatever other initiatives that has nothing to do with, like, imagine players trying to show their support. Oh, you're not allowed to be near any, like, in proximity with these people. It's not allowed. Do you hear how crazy that sounds? You can't show support for these people. What are you doing? It's gonna cause problems. But will it? We all know what this means, and it's only for queer folks and people of our community because people are against us for existing and all whatnots. Whatever. So, the league source said that the NHL was facing questions about whether coaches could wear poppies on their suit jackets in order of Remembrance Day, or if they could wear green ribbons in honor of the Humboldt Broncos bus crash, because of the whole on ice thing that they said. You're not allowed to show support on ice. So they needed clarification, and so they said that the intended purpose of the initial memo, according to the league source, was to inform teams that they cannot wear any specialty sweaters during a game, in warm-ups, or at any official practice. So even during practices, they won't be allowed to wear the jerseys. They're just not allowed to wear them anywhere near the ice, I guess. The source also said that only off-ice restrictions facing teams is what they can't force players to participate in events regarding the specialty causes, because some players might fear retribution or embarrassment if they decide not to take part. Now that sentence right there stood out to me when I read it. Why are you embarrassed? What's embarrassing?
This is pretty much a move to protect folks
From feelings.
like a Reimer, like a Provorov, where how many seasons now we've been doing this, and just because a couple of these guys decided, you know what, I have the privilege to stand here, still get paid, still be a bigot, I'm gonna take it upon myself to not acknowledge that someone should exist.
Yeah.
So all of this is just a move, and the other things are kind of added into the mix to cover the fact that this move was made because they don't want to have to deal with the backlash of not acknowledging the existence of queer people.
Right. They're not listening to the fans and what we're trying to say. Like, this is wrong. You're basically telling us we're not fully accepted in the sport. We're letting you know that we're not okay with it. And they don't want to hear it. So this is they're basically putting a band-aid on this situation where, or even just a blindfold, you know? I don't want to look at it. This is not my problem. I don't have to deal with it. It's annoying. I don't expect anything more of the NHL at this point. I'm tired. Like, this is very, very, very much expected. But we talk about it because we know what, you know, the actual intentions are. What we, you know, this is a part of what we have to deal with all the time. It sucks, but it is what it is. We'll still be pretty loud about speaking up about it.
I will say before we move on to the next thing that going back to when this was initially put out, before the clarification was asked by multiple outlets, that I'm trying to see this on a optimistic perspective. Obviously, it's shitty, but even with the current state before the hot mess happened last season, there were a lot of things that I enjoyed about having these nights, in particular to Pride Night, is there were certain teams that were taking extra steps to not only engage with the community and to reach out to someone to actually within the community to design the jersey. There were a lot of great things happening. One of the things that I wish would be the next step before all this happened was, like, for instance, the San Francisco Giants, how they wore their Pride jerseys for the entire game. And it's such a simple thing too. It's just the little arm patch thingy, and then it's the, you know, the rainbow colors on, over the logo. It's such a simple thing though, but it's so impactful on top of because it's like a 4-hour game. You're watching this game, you're seeing it in just every single frame.
Yeah.
Versus something like during the warm-ups, unless you're watching the pregame and unless the pregame broadcast is actually deciding to show it to you, unless you go to the game and see it for yourself. And this is, obviously we know queer folks are going to be looking forward to that stuff and everything, but it's one part to let queer folks know that this is a place for you. It's another to allow folks who might not realize yet that they're part of the queer community, or maybe they haven't seen something like this and it, causes them to question, well, what is that? Let me learn more about that. Like, that's not something you're going to see during warm-ups unless you're in those 3 scenarios that I already talked about. Yeah. But something, going back again to the Giants, it's during their game for 4 hours. It's on the national broadcast, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I see this as, well, time for the teams to actually show us what they're about.
Yeah.
You've got this restriction, but that's not the end-all be-all. There are a plethora of other ways that you can show support for the queer community. Obviously, they can do it not on the ice. Well, there you go.
And it's only warm-ups that aren't on the ice, right? Like, there are other things you could do to show support that you could wear on the ice, and it could be for the whole game.
Like, if you feel like, oh my god, now what do I do?
Just order rainbow helmets. I'm just kidding. That's too much. No, I do want to go back. Like, even just within hockey, the AHL teams are still allowed to do these, right? This is another reason you should go support your AHL affiliates if you're able to. The Barracuda. I forgot to post this in our little thingy thing to talk about. For Hispanic Heritage Month, or just to celebrate Hispanic heritage, they're not just celebrating it one night, first of all, which is really exciting. They're doing 3 nights. And it's not just in 1 month. They're going to do one at the end of this month on the 28th of October. They're doing one in January, and I can't remember when the third one is. But they designed amazing. They got someone to design this amazing jersey for them to wear. Like, the logo, if you guys haven't seen it, I have been raving about it since they posted it. The logo is so detailed with all the little, Easter eggs that they hide in there. It's Tigres del Mar, so Tigers of the Sea. That's what the CUDA are called. The logo is of a tiger, but it's also supposed to be like a goalie mask in there, and then it's wearing a headdress. It looks like just triangles. It kind of looks like symbols of something, but it says CUDA if you look close enough to it, and they have sugar skulls on the back and little CUDA, actual Barracuda on there with flowers, and the stripes and the colors are just amazing. I love it. I love it so much. So they're doing 3 games where they're going to be wearing these jerseys on the ice. I'm pretty sure. Don't quote me on that. I'm pretty sure.
I think you're right. Yeah.
I definitely want to go. They're going to be handing out pins for the first 1,000 fans to go to these games. They're all different designs, but they're going to be 3 different pins. And then if you sign up for the some ticket package where you attend all 3 games, then you also get a special a jersey, so you can get one for yourself. And I'm considering it, but I'd have to dip into the savings for that. But why can't the NHL do that? It's not hard. It's so fun. Appreciate outside of just the one night, Anyways.
Just giving all kinds of amazing ideas that could really bring the NHL to the next level of viewership. But, don't listen. It's fine.
I'm not giving you my ideas for free. What?
I want to just quickly note, when you were talking about the little Easter egg designs in the logo for this specialty jersey, that this is why you have people who are actually from that ethnic background to design these logos for you. Not, because I'm not really talking about anything in particular.
I think you are, though.
I am, though. But
something that I like,
because there's history behind designs.
Yeah.
And that's what make the designs powerful and meaningful. And not just, oh, I think this is a nice aesthetic. It's so exotic. I want to culturally appropriate this and make a design and then make lots of money off of it. Yeah, that's all I want to say.
I mean, okay, if we're going to address this, I also want to say...
I wasn't going
no,
to.
I want to say something. Okay. Look, last week I put out a tweet and we started getting a bunch of really hateful comments that I'm not going to repeat here. And it took a lot.
Very misogynistic and
homophobic. I saw
homophobic, racist. Well, yeah.
It took a lot for me to not engage with these trolls. Chicago fans seem to be some of the worst in the sport. I literally had to disengage from socials to keep away. But I did turn off the comments, and I got called out in the quotes. I did go check some of them. And I'm like, I don't want to sit here all day reading all this hateful ish, But I also wanted to say that we're not trying to engage with these folks also to give them attention and, if you engage with them, whether it's commenting, reposting, whatever, other people are going to see it. And a lot of these comments are triggering for a lot of folks in our community, and we're not trying to spread that hate either. So if ever it happens again, we will not be addressing any of those ridiculous comments because we're trying to keep our peace here. We don't need that. That's all.
So this might be I'm just going to add one little note before we move on to the next thing. I was talking to a friend of mine about all of this over the week, and you're allowed to have a different opinion, or, even within the queer community, we don't see eye to eye on other things. And there's certain things where I'm going to have zero negotiation on. And there's a lot of people who they are trans, but they believe in the binary. And that in itself means that you don't acknowledge my gender identity. And there's a lot of people who believe that you cannot be trans unless you medically transition. There's a lot of privilege behind. There's people, regardless of whether they're non-binary, trans men, trans women, who don't medically transition. Do you even have health care that you can access to even do the transition? And there's a lot of people who don't feel that it's necessary, and you don't, in my opinion, regardless of whether you are a binary trans person or you acknowledge non-binary people, you don't need to medically transition to validate your identity. If you don't feel that that is what is needed for your transition, it should not be required to have people acknowledge your identity. And like I said, there are certain things, like I just finished ranting about, where there's no negotiation for me. If you are not acknowledging my gender identity, I'm not arguing. I am not allowing you to talk to me to argue your point. Same goes with ethnicity. I don't always see eye to eye with certain things with even people close to me. Obviously there's a point where it's like, no, we will not allow for certain things to be acknowledged and debated on. But there's certain things where it's like a logo. There are people who are fine with it that are of indigenous background. There are people who aren't cool with it. They're all valid and stuff. But the ones that I was just laughing my ass off about, one of them being like people assuming that we're white. Like, have you seen our channel?
They probably didn't click on ours.
You obviously haven't seen our channel. We are not white. And on top of that,
I saw a lot of bros.
we're
Like,
apparently also men. Our history, our ethnic backgrounds, we both have intersecting experiences of having ethnic history of colonization. We understand to the extent that a lot of our cultural roots have been culturally appropriated and reused by people who are typically white, and they use it in a way that they feel like they're celebrating us. And we're not trying to talk over people who, in this particular situation, we're talking about Indigenous people within the US and within Canada. Generally speaking, you can have discussions about whether this design you are okay with and which ones that you are not. And as I was reading some of the different viewpoints about this logo, I remember reading this one article from about like 10 years ago where there's this indigenous person who is within the Chicago, Illinois area, grew up. Obviously, this is the team that's there, so they like they like hockey. But at a certain point, they stopped going to games. They're still supporting the team because I understand it's like it's tough. Because you're like, I want to love this sport, but then there's aspects of it that I don't love. And like, you kind of have to navigate at what point is it too much for you? How long do you stick around? But this person said that they stopped going to games because with that logo, it's like a sea of floating heads. And I was like, fuck. That is disturbing. With the history that we have in this country, that is disturbing. That a person an indigenous person feels that when they go to the game. Mm-hmm. So all these people who are saying like, there's all this, it's celebrating. There's a whole nother side of it where it's like, yeah, it's not celebrating.
Yeah.
It's just disturbing.
I also want to point out that it's only been maybe 5 years since the team has banned wearing headdresses to games. And I feel like this logo it opens up the opportunity for cultural appropriation, right? People don't take indigenous culture seriously if you're using them as mascots. If you're using, like, these logos are caricatures of what they assume the culture is like. I read up a little bit on it because I was I was trying to see, like, am I wrong in having this opinion? Because I did also see some people saying, oh yeah, I'm indigenous, I have no problem with this logo, but they didn't have a profile picture. I don't know if they were actually indigenous. And the wife of the dude who started the team or whatever is the one who designed it originally. Like, and that doesn't sit well with me, right? Like, it's just a white lady drawing what she thinks Black Hawk look like, I guess. And then I went down another little rabbit hole on a Reddit thread. And someone of indigenous background was explaining that there's the things wrong with the logo, how they're not accurate because the markings that they have on the face are from one tribe. I think the feathers or something are from another tribe, and it's just like the way that they depict it, it doesn't make any sense because it's not the tribe Blackhawk was actually from, and the actual name Blackhawk isn't even supposed to be honoring the actual man. The name came from some military thing that the owner at the time who started the team was trying to honor. So it's like, it makes no sense.
It is a lot of hoops that people are going to justify this logo, and at the end of the day, I keep going back to obviously allow the folks who are affected by the logo to decide how they feel about it. And as we've already discussed, there is arguments coming from, hey, doesn't really bother me, I'm fine with it, to, hey, it is actually really disturbing to me. And like I said, I think it goes beyond just this ethnic background, going back to what I talked about, how, even though I'm Filipino and Chinese and you're Salvadorian, we have a lot of intersections in our cultural history that we can relate to one another with, going back to colonization. Like, that has a lot of trauma, and even though you are not directly affected, it still comes down through the family history. There's a lot of like indigenous roots that I want to talk about in a little bit that I've learned with just talking to my mom this past week, that it does bother me that I don't know about that part of myself. So there is a bit of a identity crisis at times for me, where it's like I say, oh yeah, of course I'm Filipino and Chinese, but like, what does that actually mean? Because just being Filipino and just being Chinese, it's not they're far more intricate than just those labels alone. And for somebody who does not experience that, when you're just like, oh, well, yeah, that's a Chinese person, and then you can just like go on with your day. It's like, for me, I'm like, oh, but what part of China is your family from? Because
China's big.
Yeah, it's huge. So, it's like, even though if you're Chinese, like, it could also mean, like, if you're saying someone is Chinese, you could actually be like offending someone if they're actually from Taiwan. So it's like things like that I think about, that I feel like some of the comments that we were getting, it's like, you don't even know what you're even talking about. Yeah. Like, anyways, but let's move on.
Yes, let's talk about Filipino history. Wait.
Yes, you tell me what you learned about Filipino people.
Okay, so just a very little. I've mentioned before, I grew up in a suburbs out here in Hercules where there's a lot of Filipino families. I had a lot of Filipino friends growing up. And so I'm somewhat familiar with the culture, right? I wouldn't say I'm an expert or anything, no. But I do know, like, certain food.
Nessa won't be drawing any Filipino logos anytime soon.
I will not.
Making tons of money off of it.
I will never attempt. I will, however, enjoy some of Filipino foods. There's some days where I'm like, yeah, I'm feeling some chicken adobo today. Okay, so Filipino peoples from the Philippines were some of the first people to come to California. I think I've mentioned this in the previous podcast episode. What I didn't know was that they came through, I believe, the Bay Area, so San Francisco, and they sort of settled in San Francisco to go work in other parts of like Northern California, where they worked in fields as farmers in San Joaquin, Sacramento Valley. I didn't know that they were basically most of the farmers out here first. That's something new that I learned. Because they came in through San Francisco, it's where they settled first. And they had what was called Manila Town in Soma. so south of Market, or Central City, a bachelor community that later became Manila Town. Eventually, with gentrification and stuff, they did end up getting kicked out of there, or they moved on. But that's where a lot of Filipino families started settling in Daly City. And Daly City actually has probably the biggest Filipino population in the entire country, which makes up roughly 40.7% of its population, like in the actual city. And okay, I don't know if you've ever heard this joke. It doesn't come from me. I've heard this from Filipino folks, okay? Where, did you know that the reason Daly City is so foggy is because of all of the rice cookers?
No, I've not heard that.
It's just like one of those, wow, dad jokes. But yeah, so Daly City has the highest concentration of Filipino Americans in the United States. It is known as the Pinoy capital of the United States, with Filipino culture and small businesses in full display. I learned this through a Instagram post. My God, I can't talk today. I learned this from a post off of Instagram called Cut Fruit Collective. So, all credits to them for posting this. It says, meanwhile in SF, the Soma Pilipinas Filipino Heritage District is actively attempting to reverse erasure and revive the Filipino community in the neighborhood. Through their many place-making activities, they celebrate the cultural and artistic expressions of Filipinos in the Bay. Projects include ethno tours, the Flores de Mayo parade, I'm gonna butcher these words, I'm so sorry, I don't speak Tagalog, barangay center, and more. Partnerships with cultural arts organizations such as Cultivate with a K, Labs, Activate the Neighborhood, and cultural markets and arts programming. So it sounds like they're trying to bring a lot of that culture back into the forefront of Bay Area culture and stuff. But yeah, that's what I learned for Filipino History Month. Right? Yeah. I'm
happy that you learned something. Some of that I was pretty familiar with, and others I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So as I was telling you earlier, I asked my mom what our ethnic background is, because it's just been something that I've wanted to know a little deeper and in detail about. I mean, obviously I've known since I was very little that I have Chinese roots, I have Filipino roots, I've been to the Philippines multiple times. I haven't really been to China, mostly because even my dad's side, my dad was born and raised in the Philippines, and my grandparents, according to my mom, I believe that they also had settled there prior to that, so generations have been in the Philippines on my dad's side for a while. So I know that on my Chinese side, we are predominantly Cantonese. My family speaks both primary dialects, but the one that I remember the most growing up is Cantonese, and Cantonese is primarily from the area of Hong Kong. And then on my mom's dad's side is Filipino and Spain. So that, as I was talking to you, was a bit of like a, oh my God, like just to kind of have it be a little more solidified. Because I mean, obviously I know that the Philippines was colonized by Spain for like 300 years. So there's a lot of, in that time, there's a potential that there's mixing and things like that. But even going back to before Spain came in and, started kicking things around.
Disrespecting its surroundings.
Disrespecting everything. There's a whole history, a whole indigenous history of the Philippines that is the thing that I wish I knew more about, because even going to like the gender and sexuality side of things, like even within Tagalog, I learned that they only use a gender neutral pronoun, sia. Yeah. And I don't speak Tagalog, so that was why I was most like shocked when I found out, because everything is like I hear certain things and like I know what they're talking about, but like the framing of the language is something that I never really knew. And then obviously there's the influences from Spain that make things gendered. Things like, you know, older brother and older sister. And like other aspects, like I called my grandmother growing up, I called her Lola. I never got to meet my Lolo, but I understood that these are certain words, and I didn't realize that those were influences of Spain. So, and then I also learned that it makes sense because obviously my background being Chinese and Filipino, there was a influx of Chinese Filipinos, and that's a whole part of Filipino history that I didn't really realize was a thing. So that's kind of like really got me wanting to learn more and more about it, but it also is a little bit heartbreaking that a lot of our culture has been wiped out
Yeah.
because of colonization.
Yeah, I feel this the exact same way, like with my roots, because again, you mentioned being Latina. You know, we were colonized by Spaniards as well, which is why we speak Spanish in Latin America.
I can hear Elena like apologizing
In the background,
to us.
little voice. sorry. But it's like, you know, those 23andMe things where you can find out where where your roots come from. I want to know what indigenous tribes my family comes from. You know, like I want to learn about the history there, but we don't get the privilege of knowing history because our history was wiped out with the colonization. You know, when those folks decided to come and ruin everything here and genocide almost everyone. So, like, the way I identify, you know, I say I'm Latina, which, sure. But I feel like I have more of a connection with the indigenous side than I do with the Spanish side, even though I speak Spanish and, you know, I'm pale skin or whatever it is. And it's more so because of the way that, mostly on my dad's side, how we've come, and there's certain things that, like, practices we do on the spiritual side that it's very connected to, you know, what my great grandma used to practice. And even though the spirituality itself comes from Africa, I feel like there's certain parts of it that intertwines with practices from the indigenous folks in their cultures. And like even just learning about the Native Americans from here in the US, you know, there's certain things there where I kind of feel connection to for some reason with certain practices that they do. You know, when I'm learning about their history, it's like, yeah, I can see that because, you know, there's still indigenous folks in El Salvador. The tribe is called Pipil, and I'm pretty sure they speak Nahuatl, which is one of the few languages that have survived colonization. And, you know, it's also spoken in Mexico. The Aztecs used to speak it, but some Mayans did as well. And I don't know, it's like one of those things where I'm just so drawn to it. Like, I want to learn how to speak that language. I want to learn more about these certain tribes and these indigenous customs and things, you know. I was actually starting to rewatch, or I went back to watch Reservation Dogs. Have you heard of that show?
Mm-hmm.
It follows a bunch of kids, if you don't know it, anyone listening, follows a bunch of kids who lives in a reservation in Oklahoma. And, you know, obviously they're talking about certain practices that they do. And I was surprised. There was an episode I was watching last night that really made me cry because they were talking about, you know, how the ancestors are always walking with you and stuff. And, you know, that's something that my family is always talking about, you know, with the spirituality thing. You know, the ancestors are always watching over you. If you need help, you can ask for help and all this. And for some reason, it really hit me hard. As a segue, though, Elena sent this link about I don't know if it's a short film or no, I think it's a short film. It's going to be on Disney Plus for their Launchpad thing that they do. So I'm pretty sure it's called The Roof. The director posted a leaky roof and the truth. After being sent to stay with their grandfather, a Northern Cheyenne teen discovers a connection to their family and community in the way they never thought possible. I think it's already on Disney Plus because it says September 29th. Whoops. Okay, so something I need to watch. And it's basically following this teenager who is confused about their identity. Talks to their grandpa. Finds out that their grandma was actually Two-Spirit. And so, this teen is finding out, oh, I'm Two-Spirit, and kind of going through, like, learning about what that is and kind of coming into terms with that and accepting that's who they are. And also learning that, oh, someone else in my family was too. So, Two-Spirit is not something that we usually talk about because we don't know too much about it. I don't have any Indigenous friends and I don't go out of my way to research it because I like to learn from people's experiences more than online stuff. So I don't want to speak on things that I'm not fully informed on, but Two-Spirit is also from what I know, it's also one of those genderless sort of identities people, but it's more spiritual than that, which is why it's only Indigenous folks who can identify as Two-Spirit. It's more so with whatever they're dealing with spiritually than it is actual gender identity. So, from what I know, I hope I explained that okay.
Yeah, that's also something that I watched a documentary about in relation to the Philippines and the indigenous roots and how what you're talking about in terms of Two-Spirit, acknowledging non-binary, just things that are a mixture of the gender or void of gender, and that's something that kind of gets wiped out when you have colonization history and how they start bringing in their influences and their religion and things like that. Like we could even reference like how Canada has their history with the First Nations and the residential
schools.
Yeah, like that's all they're trying.
That happened here in the U.S. too.
Though. Yeah. Like they all got their different names, but they all kind of follow the same sort of pattern of they're seeing these within any country. They're seeing this as like, oh, these people are uncivilized. They need to be. They need to be taught. They need to be taught in our ways so that, they can stop being, quote unquote, savages. And however it happens in any of these, in these histories, they all kind of follow the same pattern of they're trying to wipe out that cultural identity, those ways of life, that there's nothing wrong with it. It's just people see it as something to be fixed. And then we find ourselves in this situation where we're trying to track our roots, and as something as far back as over 300 years with the Philippines. It's like, even I wanted to mention even with those things with like 23andMe, it's like those tests or those databases are built from other people. Like you obviously have to expand on it by more and more people submitting their DNA or whatever it is that they're using to tell you what your cultural background is. But after generation of it being, you're mixing or more of that stuff goes away, it's like how many of those people are still alive to actually, track that stuff down.
Mm-hmm. Wow, what an interesting episode this turned out to be, huh?
Well, let's end on a positive note. I mean, not that any of that stuff isn't like, educational and stuff, but it is kind of, it's stuff that I think about from time to time. And it's frustrating to, learn about it, but then it just I love learning about it, but then it opens up more doors. I end up having more questions than when I started out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was announced the other day that the Bay Area is getting a WNBA team, and it's about freaking time. And what perfect timing that I got into watching the WNBA last season. And it took a lot of courage for me to follow an LA team, but I did it.
You're so brave.
I am brave. I'm so brave. I mostly picked it because of Laisha Clarendon, non-binary person, playing on that team. So, but generally I was like, let's support all of the WNBA. But in particular, I think I'm going to follow this team. And the moment I picked that, I was also like, but damn, I wish we would get a Bay Area team. So
you manifested this.
I did.
This is all you're doing.
So
I'll thank Jay for this.
Yeah. So this kind of comes, I don't really know how it works, but apparently the Warriors had been working on kind of bringing this to the table and saying, you know, hey, let's bring, you know, a women's team to this area. Here's all our support, like blah, blah, blah. And, you know, one thing led to another, and the WNBA is deciding, yes, we're going to start expanding again, and the first team in the next expansion is going to be for the Bay Area.
Is it just this one? I thought that they announced 2 teams.
I believe they have plans to bring
Portland.
a team to Portland, but I'm not sure off the top of my head if that was like official, but the Bay Area is official.
Okay. So, more women's sports in the Bay Area. How exciting.
Yep.
More reason to stay here. I'm just kidding. Okay. What a long episode. I feel like this was a good one.
Yeah.
Some sports, some more serious topics. Dude, we had some history lessons in here.
So, to close it out, I'm going to use a phrase that I learned this past week as I watched the season 2 finale of Philippines Drag Race, which had not 1, not 2, but 3 trans women competing. There are 2 trans women on the judges panel, and then there was 1 non-binary person. So it just like, I had so much love throughout the whole, and I particularly love watching the Drag Race seasons that happen in like other countries because of all the cultural related stuff. Like, yeah, you know, the main one that's in the US, that one's fun, but I've just become engrossed in like the ones that are happening. Like, I watched the one that was done in like Mexico. There was one that was done in France, which I got obsessed with because there was a drag queen, Lolita Banana, who is originally from Mexico.
I love their names.
But she like has been in a relationship with somebody who is from France and moved over there some time ago, speaks French, which is like blowing my mind. It's like a Mexican person speaking French. Like, I have this friend that I met when I was traveling through Europe. He's ethnically Vietnamese, but I mean, Vietnam has a whole colonization related history as well, tied in with France. So his family, he was born and raised in France. And when I met him in Greece, there was a moment where I was just kind of staring at him like it's a Vietnamese person speaking French. I just, like, my brain is just like short-circuiting.
I had a similar moment where when I was working at Boudin in San Francisco, there was like a family of Chinese folks. Pretty sure they were Chinese, and they came up and they were speaking like fluent Spanish better than me, and I was like, "What?" It's
crazy.
Come to find out that there's a history of like Chinese immigrants that went to like Peru or something, and
we're everywhere.
Different countries in Latin America, but they have like little like pockets in each city where like they like to stay. I think there might be one in El Salvador too. But this is something that I just recently, within like the last 10 years, learned. So that like it's something you don't really think about until you see it, you know? It just your brain's like, wait.
For the Philippines, I learned maraming salamat po, which is thank you very much. So maraming salamat po for listening to this podcast.
Oh, should I say muchas gracias?
There you go.
Two
okay.
languages. I don't know how to say podcast in Spanish, but all right.
I don't know how to say podcast either. So, okay. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.